I'd like to have a conversation, one-sided though it may be, about what I mean when I say I've learned so much from Black women. And fair warning, if you are not a Black woman, I'm not looking for your feedback on this video. Conversation, yes, absolutely, please engage, but I do not need your criticism. If you are a Black woman, I welcome it, and please tell me ways that I can do more to show my support and affection for you. All that being said, let's just want that out of the way at the beginning. I've mentioned this before, and if you know me in person, you'll know I was raised in a very conservative, culturally, politically, gender restrictive, and sadly, racist religion. And if you are a part of that religion, I need you to know I'm not saying that you individually are racist. I'm pointing out because I get to, not only was I a member for active and honorable, however you want to say it, card-carrying member for 31 years, I also taught Utah history for a decade. And I took the class in college. And I'm related to Joseph Smith. My grandma's a Smith. He's a cousin. So I get to say this. I am highly qualified to say that. So don't get defensive, okay? Let it challenge your cognitive dissonance. Go watch my video about cognitive dissonance. But it's institutionally racist. Again, if you're a member of that religion and you disagree, I'm sorry that you're wrong. And that's all I'm going to say about that. If you want to have a conversation about it, let me know. If you want to try to debate me, the debate is over. Anyway, and so I was little exposed to people of color in my younger years because I was raised in Utah. I was born in Utah. I won't say I was raised here. It's complicated. I lived in Utah County. I was born in Utah County in Payson, and lived all sorts of all over in little towns. We moved around a lot. We didn't have a lot of stability when I was a child. Excuse me. I moved 11 times before I turned 12. But anyway, that's besides the point. But if you know anything about the demographics of Utah County, particularly between 1987 and 1998, 99, 98, yeah, it's very white demographically, very white. Is it only white? No, but it is insanely high demographic, white people. And so that's kind of where I got my start. And then right before I turned 12, we moved to Las Vegas. And if you know about the demographics of Las Vegas, it's much more diverse than Utah County. And I was raised around, that's where I consider myself raised, because we lived there for the longest time. I was in Vegas. I lived in one house for 6 years, and that was the longest I've ever lived anywhere. Anywhere. That's the most stability I've ever had in my life. And then I stayed there for my first 2 years of college. So 8 years in one city. So that's why I call it home. And so I was able to, in my kind of puberty and post-puberty adolescence, experience and I was exposed to more people of color. and lots of different cultural elements. If you know anything about the demographics of Las Vegas, you'll know that most people there are a transplant of some kind. And there's not as much generational, like old life living in one place, versus like Utah County, where the people who killed, Utes, their descendants are still there. Anyway, did you know that Mike Lee is related to the only man who was executed for the Mountain Meadows Massacre? John D. Lee. Anyway, I didn't know that. I read it on Reddit. Fact check me on that, but I did look it up a little bit after that, so I think that's correct, and it makes so much fucking sense. But anyway, but you don't get quite as much of that kind of generational history, longevity in Las Vegas. And so it was very interesting to grow up there after having been in Utah, where I honestly, I made a video about this earlier about my educational experience. I didn't fit in super well. And in Vegas, I was able to find community. And I was pretty happy. Not perfect, but yeah. And all of this to say, I'm grateful for that time of being exposed to multicultural communities. And then I was a missionary for that church. So I was in Phoenix, but I was taught Spanish. So I worked with Hispanic families, Mexican, Chilean, Argentinian. I'm trying to remember all the different groups and communities that I worked with, but it was diverse, and a lot of different kinds of Spanish spoken, and cultural, like food elements and things like that, which was really cool. And Phoenix is a very diverse town too, so like even when we were working in English speaking homes, it could be, just any kind of person. And hold on, I'm cold. 1 second. Bigfoot's kind of my jam. Anyway, yes, Chester. I love you too. I'm not giving you my popcorn. He wants my popcorn. No. You already had some. Anyway. So all this to say, I'm grateful for the time that I was able to spend in multicultural, like, communities, because I think it kind of opened me up to being willing to be taught by different voices than the voices I would have originally been primed to listen to. Let's just say that. And in high school, I was exposed to jazz in a way that I never had a lot of, not that we didn't listen to. My parents had pretty eclectic tastes, but most jazz we listened to, and not in a bad way, it was really quite good, but was Nat and Natalie Cole are the only real jazz musicians I can remember listening to growing up. And I got exposed to jazz performance in high school, and it really opened my mind, opened my experience to that music, the genre, and to how powerful and beautiful it was. And it just really stuck with me. And then life experience, I kind of got separated from my music for a while. And when I came back to to performing and being in music again, I created a jazz band and found like-minded individuals who also appreciates the art. We're still together. I told my boys recently that this was the longest job. It's kind of a job. We get paid, but it's not really, it's not that it's not work, but it's not work, you know what I mean? But I've never stuck with anything this this long besides education. I did like almost fucking 15 years of postgraduate education. Anyway, post-high school, post-secondary. That's the word. Anyway. And I've had the opportunity to study and emulate Black artists for the last almost, we're coming on 8 years, in a way that I hadn't really been able to dive so deep before. And like I said, part of that's just the trajectory I was on. Part of it was just not having a lot of exposure growing up. And I'm grateful for the chance I had in high school to start finding my interest in it. But we sang mostly it was choir. I didn't have the opportunity to do a lot of jazz at school. But as I have spent time in the genre, I have learned far more about rebellion, revolution, civil rights. Because when you know anything about, if you learn about jazz and rock and roll and punk and let's be honest, country, bluegrass, all that kind of shit, most of American music comes directly from Black artists. That's what I've learned. So put that on one side. Another thing that I studied, one of the things that kept me from my music for a while, but not in a bad way, is that I studied history. I became a history educator instead of a choral educator, and I'm grateful I did that. Hi, silly boy. I would not ask for any other subject to have expertise in. And I say I got my bachelor's in history education. I've mentioned this in videos before. So I didn't specialize in a history topic. I got a little bit of everything so that I could teach it to kids. My expertise is in pedagogy and behavioral science with an emphasis in history. Okay. So I do consider myself a broad spectrum social scientist, and it's a complicated, confusing thing that I have a weird amount of expertise in. Anyway, and studying history and anthropology and archaeology and those things that kept me good at my job, helped me be informed. Please stop licking. I have misophonia. He knows this. He knows what stop licking means because it drives me nuts. Anyway, I love you. Thank you for stopping. You're a good boy. Don't do it again. You're a good boy. I love you. Those cute. He has such cute ears. Those cute ears. Just a good boy. Anyway, I was able to dive deep into the human species, human evolution, where we came from, where we migrated from, where the earliest civilizations started. The oldest civilizations are from Africa and the Middle East and India. And I will say Native America is also genuinely super fucking old, but since the species evolved out of Africa, that's where our oldest... What? Don't interrupt my lecture. Conversation. Anyway. That's where our oldest communities are from. So, Chester would like you to listen to his part of the lecture. He knows a lot. Yes? Now Athena's licking. Gross. Athena. So gross. I'm not giving you my popcorn. Stop asking. God, there's not even that much left. Let me finish my popcorn. You already had some. I'm also not giving you my Mike and Ike's. Leave me alone. You're so much. Anyway, so our species started out black. I mean, just like the earliest Homo sapiens had black skin, or what we call black. I mean, had dark, heavily melanated, skin. And that's because we evolved out of a place where having darker melanated skin would protect us from, too much sun exposure. 1 second. It's easier just to pause because Chester has Cushing's, so he's thirsty like all the time. So when he starts drinking, he's going to drink for a full minute. Anyway, so we started off with more heavily melanated skin, and as the species kind of migrated towards places with less sun exposure, we evolved less melanation, so we can absorb more sun, more vitamin D in the places where you didn't get as much. Look that up. I didn't make that up. Bill Nye has a really good short video about it if you're curious. I'm not giving you my popcorn. I'm not giving you my popcorn. Anyway. I love you. You can listen to my story. So, the species started off, that's what I learned. And also, look this up, the very oldest body that has been found in, I want to say in the UK. Yes, the UK. Had dark skin. Because light skin evolved later. We were last. This was last to the human evolution, skin-wise. What? So much. Thank you. Why am I saying all that? So that really kind of helped decenter whiteness in my worldview, so to speak, because I started learning that whiteness doesn't exist. By the way, there is no ethnicity called white, by the way. I mean, it doesn't make sense. It really doesn't. White just means bland. Let's get over that already, okay? Let's talk about how race is a construct sometime, but if you don't know that already. Is it real? Yes. In society, it is a real social construct. Is it in nature? No. No. That's a different conversation. Anyway. So that was kind of the beginning of my decentering. And also, as the more I learned about empire building, civilization, I have a lot of criticism for civilization, the term and the concept, and why people like it so much. I don't, but we'll talk about that later. I learned that being called white is just a privilege of power and position in society. And did you know that... So I'm Irish by ethnic descent. I've got a lot of Irish in me, not only, but a lot. And my last name is Irish. But the Irish who came over at like the turn of the century, 18th to 19th century. Sorry. 18 to 1900s, 19th to 20th century. If you know, you know. I do this all the time. They weren't considered white in the same way Italians weren't considered white. Polish people weren't considered. Anyone Eastern European weren't considered white until later, as they kind of got absorbed into white identity and started absorbing the privileges of being that. So it's like a whole... There are very few rules. It's just like if you're gonna be accepted as one of the people in power or not. Anyway, so that's what being a history major and a history educator taught me. And I taught history and government and geography for a decade. Okay. So I'm not brand new to this. And as a teacher of social science, you have to stay up on it because I don't know if you knew this, but history changes as evidence is found or re-examined with new technology or re-examined by women and people of color, because history was written and controlled by like white dudes for a long time. Look it up. Anyway. And so as we get more information, that changes what we teach, or it should. If you're a good fucking social science teacher, you stay abreast to the new information. So I've got like collections of archaeology magazine and other history magazines and things like that. I try to stay up on that stuff. Which is why I love history and being a social science educator, by the way, is because it's changing in the most fascinating ways. Anyway, and I love mysteries like that. I love solving humanity. Humans are the absolute best puzzle in the world. But yeah, so all of that study and comprehension of where, and God, let me talk about how when I was finishing my general ed credits at the University of Utah, which is where I got my history teaching bachelor's degree, I needed a music class. I can't remember. It wasn't a music class. It was an international studies class. I had already taken music classes. I'd taken choir down at UNLV. I took, what was it called? International music of some kind. It was some kind of international music study class, and it was incredible. I struggled to focus, like to have time. I had to work and go to school. Every time I went to school, I was also working. But like, so I had difficulties putting time on things that deserved my time. But I do have really good recall, so I've always been able to test well. Doesn't matter. That's a side tangent. But I really remembered. There's a lot of stuff I forgot, but like the way that I learned the Indian music, and India is a subcontinent. It is vast and huge, and there is so much differences in like regional music and things like that, but that there were multiple different scales with quarter tones and things like that music in East Asia uses, like these kind of microtone, like tonal changes and things like that. The throat, how do you call it? Throat singing? Mongolian throat singing, correct me if I'm wrong, and how that they can sing, and you can see it now. There's some really cool throat singing rock bands and stuff like that are performing right now. They sing with like overtones, and like it's super cool. And I just learned a lot about music in different parts of Africa, and I loved that class. This is why I love college. It really did expose me to so many things. And so that kind of opened I had been restricted as a choir kid, for most of my pre-college years. I was mostly singing European music, white people music. So I didn't have as much, not none, but not as much exposure to international music. And it taught me so much. Really opened my eyes, to the genius of other cultures and other people around the world. And on top of all of that, another class that I took while I was at the U that changed my entire goddamn trajectory was a gender studies class. It was incredible. And when I started the class, I didn't like it because it challenged the cognitive dissonance that I was holding, because I, a non-binary person who never did fit well into the role of femininity that was prescribed to me by the religion I was a part of and the culture I was living in, because at that time, of course, I was living back in Utah. Long story. Ended up here. Still here. Since 2010. I did not like a lot of what was being said because it challenged a lot of the way I was raised. And the things that I was taught were rigidly true. By the end of that class, my mind was beginning to crack open. My defenses were beginning to lower. I won't say I was done, but I got so much out of that class. God, look at me. Oof, it's making me emotional. I wish I could remember that professor's name. I'd look him up. It was taught by a man, a very sweet, gentle man who really did incredible work opening my eyes to my own oppression. Anyway, and that, yes, that is part of this. So how does this all lead to Black women teaching me? As I studied jazz musicians, of course I gravitated towards the female voices because that's the voice that I've been trained with the most. I learned about the lives of the women who I was emulating. And no one has matched my voice better than Nina Simone. She's a low voice person like me. And incredibly talented, and a revolutionary person. Go listen to Mississippi, goddamn. Go listen to Strange Fruit. I want to say that was Billie Holiday. God, I'm a problem for not remembering that. But more than one person covered that. I will not. It's not my place to cover those songs. Those are sacred. I'm not going to touch them. But I will promote them. Anyway. One second. Anyway, as I studied United States history so that I could teach it, and as I taught it and had to become more familiar with more of the specifics, I learned the depths of the torture and the inhumanity of slavery and the Jim Crow era, the Black Codes, all the things pre-civil rights, the civil rights movement itself. I learned a lot about violence and death. I learned how Native America was treated. And that's a video for a different time because I have learned so much from them too. They get their own, they deserve so much time. But I learned how my ancestors were complicit in harm. I learned how my culture, my community that I was raised in, created harmful situations for people of color, for Black people, and how they perpetuated racism in this state from the time they settled out here. And I learned how westward expansion was actually as much harm as it caused. No diminishing that. But there was actually a freedom
out here for women and non-indigenous, I will be clear, non-indigenous people of color. I mean, not that they're gone. Native Utahns, native people are still here, but goddamn, they were video for another time. But uh, I I taught it. I learned it, and I taught it. And as I taught, I got better at teaching it. I gained more information, and I was very careful about choosing the resources that I used to teach it. I found videos and writings created by Black scholars, Black historians. And so anytime we talked about slavery, I tried my very best to take a step back and use the voices of those impacted the most. And one of the ways that I have to this day kept up on this is I purposefully choose Black content creators, but I focus primarily on Black women or Black and queer or gender nonconforming content creators because Black women have been fighting the longest and the hardest for the worst, against the worst treatment of any humanity, of any humans in the United States throughout our history. That's the intersectionality of being women and being Black has made them targets of the worst violence and the worst torture and the worst dehumanization and the worst disenfranchisement. So, all that being said, what I have learned from Black women through all of this, through spending time with their music, their voices, their lectures, their lessons, their humor, their hair care, their beauty and fashion and art. I can't even put into words. Anyway, but what they've taught me the most, I was raised in a culture where I was told that I can't say no, and I'm very good at saying no, but that you just kind of put up with things and you don't recognize when you're being mistreated, and when you do recognize, you don't speak up, you don't use harsh language, you don't use your anger. I learned rage. I learned how to communicate my rage from Black women. I learned how to communicate my boundaries. I learned how to communicate revolution. If you notice, I hope you notice a trend on my Facebook page specifically, but I'm going to rebuild. I'm going to build up in Instagram and TikTok. It doesn't matter. I think you'll notice a trend in the content that I share, and it is primarily Black women, and it is incredible. Scholarship. I have learned so much metacognition and scholarship and the ability to articulate social and political harms from Black women. And when you think about it, as much as I do, and I do think about it quite a lot, to me it makes sense. Did you know that we have one known grandmother ancestor, like that everybody shares mitochondrial, DNA with one person, and she is a black woman. Well, was like 200,000 years ago. So it makes sense to me if our DNA is basically memory code, like every little piece of DNA is like a little memory card or a memory stick. And if you believe the studies that are coming out that says we inherit genetic memory, things like being afraid of spiders could be a couple 100,000 years old, things like that, that we have in every cell in our body ancient memory. It makes sense that people who resemble our earliest grandparents would have the oldest memories and the most wisdom about it. It's just a theory that I have. So I hope I didn't put my foot in my mouth. I hope this made sense. I intend only the deepest respect and support. I sometimes fuck shit up when I say things and don't always say things right, but I do my best. But yeah, that's my, I don't know, ode to black women as my educators. I owe them my music, my voice, the voice that I have learned, the social emotional intelligence, the political intelligence, the awareness of other people's suffering. The word woke means being awakened and made aware of your oppression. I owe most of my awareness to them. And I'm grateful for the labor that you have done. Thank you. Anyway, I hope to continue your work and do my part to repair. I consider myself stuck here in Utah until I have repaired the damage that my ancestors have done here. If that makes sense. And that just means I didn't do the stuff that they did, but I inherited the problems that were caused by their behavior. And I could move out of the state and make it somebody else's problem, but what I'd rather do is be a part of its destruction and then get out of the way so that other people can take over. And that's a bigger conversation for another day. Anyway, yeah. Thank you. Women of color generally, not just black women, but specifically black women, because you guys also taught me how to laugh, how to celebrate, how to wear bright, beautiful outfits with joy and no shame. And I'm not kidding. I learned from black hair care content creators how to take care of my curly hair and to get my curl back. And I'm very grateful for the music. It speaks to my soul. It helps me sing out my soul. Anyway, that's enough, I think. I hope that was good. I hope that was okay.